You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous. Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
Born wild.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. We are just chit-chatting and going, damn it, we should be recording. So I'm recording. So we'll touch back with that, but I want to introduce everyone to our new student midwife, assistant midwife, Clover. And maybe you can just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive back into the juicy conversation we're having.
Yeah. So I am a student midwife. I'm in my 4th year of midwifery school. I go to Midwifes College of Utah, and I was born at home in Berkeley and have been doing kind of birth and reproductive justice related work since I was out of high school. And yeah, I was working at a birth center before this, so I'm really excited to be diving into home birth with Sophia, and kind of switched preceptors at the last minute a few months ago and found Sophia kind of through some just magical intervention, and it feels like a really nice fit. So I've been working with her team for about the last 3 weeks or a month or so.
Yeah. And if you hear crunching, it's because Clover made me sorry I missed the birth cookies.
They're chocolate chip cookies.
So yeah, maybe touch base on that.
Yeah, so I went on call for this, just for the practice, probably 3 weeks ago, right around the time that I was starting. And I've been on call for maybe the past 7 years. And I have my routine down, I put my phone next to my head, I turn up the volume, I check that everyone's on emergency bypass. I have my whole thing, and I had broken the screen on my phone about a week ago, and the speaker I think also got damaged because when I was talking to Sophia and other people on the phone, I would miss phone calls and she couldn't quite hear me, but I wasn't really putting it together. But yeah, so she called me a few nights ago, at 12 a.m. and I missed every call. And that's the only thing that I could figure out. So I brought my phone in yesterday and it got fixed and the speaker got fixed. So I think the problem is solved. But yeah, it was a mortifying experience as a student midwife to miss those calls.
Way to be unreliable.
Yeah, geez, I was like, I'm trying to build trust and know that she can depend on me. And yeah, it was fun. I woke up, I just tears streaming down my face. My partner was like, she's probably gonna understand, but
which I did.
It was a very good learning experience for me because he was like, this is why you're in midwifery school. You make this mistake now, you'll never make it again.
Yeah.
So.
And do it now before you're the primary midwife,
totally.
Right? And you don't show up for a birth.
Yeah. And it was funny because this last birth, when I woke up, I was like, well, thank God, at least she had another student there. And
I didn't.
Student had also missed the birth.
And the dad walked in 10 minutes before the baby was born because he was at work in the city. So I was saying no part of me was mad at anyone. I knew nobody was doing it on purpose, but it definitely was really challenging to get a birth tub set up, give hip pressure, help her with her vomiting. I definitely felt oh my God, I need a little more help,
Totally.
And she was going so quickly. So it was a little frustrating to not have all hands on deck for those really quick, mole tips. But it worked out, and she had a water birth. It's always a miracle.
So incredible.
Through the computer, very jealous.
Yeah. So we had talked about wanting to discuss today student sustainability. And we just so happen to have 2 students here.
Where's Emma? What's Emma up to?
Yeah, Emma has a study group that she's booking it up north to make it to, because she's so close to being licensed, and all she needs right now are to finish her modules. So she has some women that flew into town and traveled to her. They're all gathering to, it's very like choppy. Do you guys hear that? My internet.
Yeah.
So she's booking it up north to host that so that everyone can cram and get modules done. Yeah. Yeah, and I can touch base on Emma's behalf too, because she is like an hour from me, and so she's really far from clients, and it's hard when you have multips who have prodromal labor and the start-stop stuff, like knowing when to go. And so the reason she didn't make it to the birth is because she was hesitating if this was like the real thing. Because the mom had been having contractions, you know, every 5 minutes, lasting a minute and a half for 3 hours every night for like, you know, 3 weeks. So it was like, is this it? Do I really want to drive all that way just to go home? You know, it's like hard to tell. And so I said, well, I'll just let you know when I get there what I think. And if she had just left when I left, she would have made it, but it wasn't enough time by the time I got there. So she said that her lesson was always just believe the mother, you know, and not that she didn't believe her, but just like always go based on that. And I was telling her kind of the point of being a student is to pretend this is your client, you know, that you are the primary midwife. And I asked her, like, if that mom had been talking to you and you were her midwife, would you have not gone? She's like, no, I would have gone, you know, but because she wasn't, she felt like, oh, well, maybe I can wait and see. But it's like, as a student, like, try to pretend these are your clients, you know, and that you are the primary, and what would you do, you know, because it's good to practice that. And she lives in such a rural area. She's trying to decide, do I want to be that far away from clients, you know, or I'm having to drive hours to get to them.
Yeah, we talked about that in the past. It's like, one of the things about being a midwife is, you know, like I live in Marin County. I would love to live further west, like out by the beach. You know, there's a midwife that lives out in Bolinas. Like, you know, I love Inverness. I don't know if you guys know that area, but yeah, having already being kind of in central Marin, I end up driving so much. Yeah. And it's hard to live hours away from somebody. So yeah, it's always that question. Well, that's why I had that truck that I was going to put a mattress in the back and just camp out in front of people's houses.
Yeah.
For an early labor, but we don't know how that ended. Yeah. But you know what I was thinking about, Sophia, when we were talking about the phone thing, like missing births or being wonky, is that I could, you know, but I don't think I've ever missed a birth because like my phone was off or something. I've had random ghost spirits turn my phone off or not work. Like, remember, I won't do her name because we don't have permission, but it was a birth that you were doing photos and the mom's water bag opened and it was Sophia, do you remember, so I won't say her name because we don't have permission directly, but the birth where you were doing photos and it wasn't that my phone, the ringer was off or anything, but it was a spirit who came to decide that my phone wasn't going to work because you called me. And you know, her bag of water is open and she said, she's been calling you. I'm going to head down because you were, you know, like an hour from her. That timing thing again. And I was like, okay. And then so I called them and found out what was happening. And it was her second things were going very fast. But they had called my phone several times and there was nothing on the call log. And you called me, my phone was working fine. I mean, I was in like, I was at my boyfriend at the time's house and I get calls there all the time, you know, no issue.
And when I called you, you answered right away.
Yeah. And so that birth I did miss by a couple minutes and that was exciting. But yeah, and then we were talking about it later and, you know, they were like understandably a little bit upset, but I was like, I showed them my phone. I was like, there's no missed calls. And they showed me their phone and there was record of them calling me, you know, and it was like, they didn't leave a voicemail. So that's one thing, leave a voicemail. But it was so bizarre. I was like, okay, I guess I wasn't supposed to be at that birth.
Right. Yeah.
That's where, you know.
Yeah, because I didn't make it either. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody just wanted to come. She really did. Her parents. But yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. Do either of you want to touch base on, like, as you work towards your license, what am I trying to say? Experiences you've had that shape where you want to land as a midwife, the type of, you know, like we're talking about rule or not, and like how far away you want to be from clients and how you want to structure your practice, whether it's like home, not like home visits versus office versus like, you know, what is shaping, what experiences are shaping that for you, and what's your process in deciding how you want to serve families?
Yeah, definitely thought a lot about all of that. I live in Fairfax, and I live very close to Nina.
I know, I'm like, nobody can see us. She'd be like, hi, Nina here.
Yeah,
make sure you speak on it too.
Until they learn our voices.
Yeah, voice recognition. So I feel like I have been here since I've been in the same home since I started midwifery school. So I haven't had the experience of being, I've always been central and still end up in the car for hours and hours. And it feels like, you know, it's kind of safe and comfortable to be in somewhere that is accessible and also that gets like fine phone service and doesn't have issues around that. And I picture myself staying here for a while. I don't know if I will end up establishing like a long-term practice in or elsewhere, but I don't have plans to move far anytime soon. So I kind of just picture staying in the same place, and we don't have space for a home office or anything. So it's going to be home visits close to home or anywhere. But in terms of and this kind of ties into what we were all talking about last week, just in terms of like the practice setup and things feeling kind of sustainable in terms of ownership and backup and all of that. Yeah, we think about that all the time. And I think that's a big reason why we wanted to talk. I definitely feel like it's key for me to think about my own practice up in like conjunction with another person or people. It just doesn't feel sustainable to me otherwise. And so I spend a lot of time.
Group practice, you mean?
Yeah, while I'm practicing, like either having, you know, a small like crew that takes turns being off and on call. I feel like the on-call thing, like you know, you've been on call for 7 years and, you know, same, except for some time I took off to have my daughter, but you don't really notice what that feels like until you're off call. And then it's like, oh, right, this is the feeling of being off call. So I definitely value that, the opportunity to feel what it feels like to be off call, and then
how long does it take to really feel like you're off call? Because there's always that, like, where's my phone? But you like, it takes detox time to wean off.
Right, it's like a couple weeks to.
And then by the time you get used to it, you're like, and I'm back on call.
Exactly. Yeah. I took a long enough time off after my daughter was born that I like very used to being off call, and I've been, you know, on call for 8 months now or something again. So, being on call comes back really quickly. Being off call, it takes a while to get used to, for sure. But I definitely, take in a lot of when I hear about different midwifery practices and how they have things set up and what that looks like that's all very valuable to me and has kind of like shifted and changed and evolved over the course of the last 10 years, just in terms of my own vision for myself. And I haven't like landed in exactly what this is going to look like, but it's something.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting question too about like, when you're a practicing midwife, where do you want to live, and centrally, or what, all of that, but also just as a student, like what's feasible as a student, where can you be? And, it's like, if you need to be close to town, especially if you're like expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive to live in those places and to function as a student and all of that. So it's an interesting.
And as a preceptor, I'm learning too, because Emma is my first student and now I have Clover. And I was a student recent enough that I can remember like what worked and what didn't for me, what felt good, what didn't. In terms of like how far away students are from clients, one thing I've noticed is unless we're already together doing appointments together, and so then we go to the birth together, Emma has never experienced setting up for a birth. She's like, because when the mama needs me, I just go. I can't wait an hour for her to get to me for the most part. And so she meets me there and it's all kind of done, because that's like the first thing I do is just getting everything at spot. So it's like she's missing that piece because it's such an important piece to like practice, and for me, that's one of the biggest helps is setting it all up, and having somebody with the mom and getting the birth tub and like dialing it all in, and then you just kind of hunker down and hold space. But like that piece she's only done like once with me, when we were together. So that's something to consider too, is if you can't be there when your preceptor gets there, you miss out on pieces.
Right. That's one of the great things about living 5 minutes from each other is we give birth at the same time. Like that's kind of part of. And as Nina's getting close to being done, a lot of it is like, we know about the bowl, right? I think probably most of the people listening to our podcast know what that is. But, it's like the medium-sized salad bowl with with your instruments and gloves and maybe some pit and whatever, But every midwife has like their bowl. Mm-hmm. Right? Like the things that they want in it. And so, I don't know. Recently I've been like, okay, you need to make your bowl.
Make your bowl.
And it has the same stuff in it and it's close enough, but it's like, when you have a student who's almost done, just being like, okay, now you set up how, and it's good practice. Like I didn't have that. I finished up school at a birth center. And so it was like, we had a cart where everything was, and it was like, and it made sense, but very different than being at home.
There's considerations like.
And for anyone listening who doesn't know what Leah's talking about, we have some sort of bowl with all the things for, really it's for if the mother was like fluttering from room to room and we're just following her around, like, where is she going to drop her baby? We have all the things we need for the moment of birth in case we, aren't in the room we thought we were going to be in. So that's what the bowl is for.
And making decisions around where things go and kind of estimating, they've been spent in this room, then we're going to set up here, but have it be by the door in case they're over here and I have my bowl. And like, I've been doing that for years, and it's really important experience to participate in that setup and be able to set up the tub on my own. And while Leah like does vitals or whatever, it's just like having two people at that phase is really great. And I think that like a lot of midwives who don't work with or the students don't necessarily come during the setup phase, like are just doing that on their own, which is really normal in practice in the Bay, but it does feel like a time to be balancing, like holding space for the mom and seeing, or the birthing person and seeing what they're doing and being there with them, and then like setting up and, and all of that.
Yeah, how to find the balance. And I love that you mentioned that like every house is different, and like strategizing, where am I going to put the O2 tank because we don't want it in her face, but we want it nearby. It's like, this is a good closet. And like, where is the resuscitation area, and just having all your stuff set up, and that you kind of have to do it on the fly each time, depending on the room that you're in.
The house size. We were at a birth recently. It was like one of the bigger houses that I've ever, more spread out than I've ever been at. And it's like,
I know the house you're
I
talking
spent
about.
a lot of time running back and forth in the hallway, like stand back.
I know that. I think I even commented one time. I did a postpartum visit when Leah wasn't feeling good. I think this is the mom. And I was like, it's quite the hallway. Am I there yet?
Sliding down the
I
bit
just
of my
gotta have
socks.
socks on. Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, I just this episode's a lot about student stuff, which is great. But we were talking about last time about the sustainability of being a student and finances and stuff like that. But one piece that I feel like we're moving into, which is great, is like having Nina do like inventory of the birth bag at the end of the birth, and like what it used, which is usually like nothing. Like my IV bag is like has dust on it, But
well, and then
what's
about like checking expiration dates, for this stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And just getting familiar with what's in there,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of stuff that, Leah's usually packing. It's like the setup. If you don't have the opportunity to practice, like packing the bag and making sure that it's great practice as a student to have that.
And that's another thing, because sometimes I'll look in my bags, I'm like, where is this? And it got put in a different spot, it's like learning where everything goes. And if you're not taking it out and setting up, you don't know where it goes back.
Yeah, and like, sterilizing instruments. I didn't do that as a student. Like I cleaned them after the birth and laid them out, and like, but my midwife preceptor her own system, like with whether it was like a pressure cooker or not, or an oven. And so, I kind of had to figure out how to do that myself. And I've done a few different things over the years to kind of find what works best. But as a preceptor, it's really lovely to have a student do that for you, and it's an opportunity to learn that stuff.
Because ideally, as a student, you're doing it enough that by the time you're a licensed midwife, you already have the repetition down, and you're not trying to like learn this new skill. And some things are time sensitive, where you're like sterilizing. I don't want to wait too long because I want to get these cleaned and in the oven or wherever. But if you don't have a student who can like come back the next day or come with you that night, or then some things they just don't have the opportunity to do because you're like, I just have to get it done, because it's time sensitive.
That's true. That is one of the reasons why it works for us well to do that, is the proximity of our
she can
homes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I feel like coming from a birth center, I'm like imagining, because at the birth center that I worked at, we did all the setup, we did all the cleaning, we did all the ordering, we did all the stocking. So and it's different. It's such a different context because, right, like at a birth center, everything's in the same place.
Have you ever done a home birth? I don't think I ever asked you that. Okay, you have.
I've done a couple of home births, but like more in an observe role.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's interesting because I can't imagine what it would be like to not do the setup or not do the cleaning or not do the sterilizing. So I feel like there's a little bit of repetition for me that I've gotten there through that birth center experience, and that piece that Nina is talking about of like figuring out how you set it all up when you're in a different environment every single time. It's, I think that'll be a learning piece for me.
Yeah. And I wanted to hear what your thoughts were about sustainability for midwifery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the sustainability question that you were just speaking to, Nina, and where to be and where you want your practice to be, I feel like I'm really in a transition moment because I've been working in the East Bay and in Berkeley, and that's where I grew up. And working at a birth center, you're always 20 minutes away from wherever
Mm-hmm.
you're never that far from clients, so there's not as many calculations that you're doing in terms of like how long is it going to take me to get from this hike to a client. It's always the same amount. and now that because right now I'm currently living in the East Bay and working with Sophia up in Sonoma, there's like a lot of driving happening, which, you know, I've known that that's just kind of home birth reality for a while, and it's a really different experience to live it. And my partner and I have been having this conversation quite a bit because we're, you know, in the process of moving to Petaluma, and he's finding these really fantastic, like, rural properties out on the outskirts of town, and he's like, let's live in this trailer, let's have a shed, let's have a big garden, which all sounds so magical to me. And then, you know, he came to me like a couple days ago and he's like, I just realized like none of these places are going to have service. What are we going to do? And I was like, yeah, it's a piece that we have to think about. It's not really something that it's not flexible. It's like a, you know, a breaking point.
A deal breaker.
It's a deal breaker. Yeah. So, you know, I think that he knew that on some level, but it really like was sinking in for him. He was like, but what if we want to go on a walk and we don't have service? So it's interesting, like watching his process, understanding how my job and all of that integrates into his experience. But yeah, I think that for me, it would be ideal to be able to live a little bit more rurally, just because that's kind of what I enjoy, but to have some, you know, be in a place like Sonoma where there's enough people to help you have a thriving practice so that you can support yourself. And, you know, in the East Bay where I was before, there's so many midwives. So in some ways it's actually not that different. Like it seems like there's fewer midwives up here, a little bit of less clients, but in the East Bay there's tons of clients and tons of midwives. So it kind of evens out of the wash.
And I feel like lately there's been even less midwives. There's been a lot of moving and retiring, and like the list I used to have of midwives in Sonoma County has been less and less. And I've been hearing lots of names coming up that used to be students that are now new midwives, which is cool. This new generation of midwives that are coming in. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I feel like with in my midwifery school, or at least like it feels like my generation or cohort of student midwives, the conversation is definitely, like you're saying, Nina, about small group practice. Like I don't hear a lot of other students talking about wanting to go into solo practice. And I don't know if that's just the tides turning a little bit and people wanting to work on sustainability, or if it's, you know, if there's something else to it, but I definitely picture that for myself also. I'd really love to be able to not only have the off-call time, but also be able to have the collaboration and the community and the backup that having other midwives in your practice lends itself to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my partner's Cuban, and we definitely, you know, when I started school, I had this idea that at some point it would be really lovely to be able to have a number of months off of call a year to be able to go be there. We have a little house and we have lots of community, and it's not something we've been able to do a lot of in the last few years because he's had a regular job and I've been in school, and it's just not flexible in that way. But thinking about like, oh, it would be really great to have, you know, like 2 months, you know, of the year when that's just like scheduled into my year cycle that we plan on being there, and kind of how that looks. And I think it's definitely something that like older generations of midwives that I've been like in contact with and around like tried and did and like have kind of ebbed and flowed out of, is having this group practice or some kind of coverage in that way. And obviously it comes with its own set of challenges and considerations. And I think sometimes people just kind of burn out on dealing with other people, and that's its own, you know, its own problem or issue or obstacle. But I'm optimistic about that vision too for myself.
Yeah, talking about vacations, because you either plan it 9 months in advance or it's completely last minute because your client delivered early and you have this like 3 days or something before you go on call again. That's what I've actually been sitting down and trying to like see, okay, where do I have windows? And, you know, I want to plan a trip to Disneyland with the kids. And so I'm trying to do it next February, you know, and like really reserve that. But then all of a sudden you'll have like a repeat client or a best friend of yours do, then you're like, scrap it all, you know, like, I gotta be there.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, Nina and I just got pagers.
That was one thing I wanted to talk about.
So excited.
I've had them on and off over the years, and it had been a couple years because I've lived in places with good service. But if I want to go to the beach or go to, I mean, the last couple years seeing live music has kind of been off the table. But if I went out to a show, I could just clip my pager on my bra and not have to like.
So cool.
Oh yeah. People were like, "Are you
1992
a drug dealer or a doctor?" It's like neither and yes. I actually had to explain to June, my 13-year-old, what a pager was yesterday. I was like, we used to do numbers that meant things. I was like, there was no texting. We would text like, I love you in a number code. It was so funny. She was like looking at me like, what?
So primitive.
I called to like reestablish Leah's pager account a couple days ago, and the guy that I spoke to was like, alphanumeric or numeric, and I was like, oh, it's numeric. He was like, really? I was like, yeah, old school. Make it work. But I think it'll be nice to have that second layer of.
It gives you just like a little piece. I mean, I remember midwives I worked with as a student. Yeah, like if we went out to dinner or something, it's like they just clip it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, not. I mean, and this was even like before cell phones were such a big. They had cell phones, although there was one that didn't for a long time. Her name starts with a D.
I thought you were looking at me.
No. No. Anyway, but like, yeah, it was like, you know, you get paged and then you ask the restaurant if you could use their phone to call, or you'd use a payphone. I mean, this was old school, but yeah, it's like, you can just have it. And then, you know, okay, if someone's in labor where they really need you, it's an emergency, they'll page you.
Yeah.
And so other things, you know, or going out to like Ray's where the reception's spotty. So anyway, we're excited.
Present with your family and not having to like feel like you have to have your phone right by you.
Oh,
here's my question.
I'm fine with that.
If you have, if there's no cell service, the pager will still page, right? It doesn't need that.
Right. I mean, it needs like a type of service, but it doesn't need the same level. So it works in like a broader area.
A lot of the American messaging now, like they have apps that interface with the phones, which I haven't looked into much, but it will forward the page or forward the text from the pager to the phone somehow. So I'm not sure like what exactly the differences are with it.
My husband was just saying that and I might butcher this, but he thinks that Elon Musk, Tesla, whatever, is coming out with satellite phones or whatever. He's going to get some sort of thing where there will literally be no service anywhere. Like you'll always have cell service. I don't know how soon that is happening, but he said he was reading about that. Like soon, if you have this device, you will never not have service, which I was like,
5G thing.
I could get on board with that.
Yeah. No, a pager seems like it would be so great. It's like you could live further out. I mean, I'm always trying to figure out how I can go surfing and be a midwife because that's one of my favorite things to do. And so I was saying to my partner yesterday, like if we had a pager, then we wouldn't be able to surf together, but one of us could be on the beach with the pager and let the other go surf, and then we could switch spots.
You could get a Pelican case. Those are waterproof. And then you just put the pager in the Pelican case.
Genius.
I was like,
forehead.
Sophia, I was like, put it in a Ziploc bag.
Yeah. Throw it in your wetsuit.
The waterproof thing is much better.
That's the student version, the cheaper version. If you can't afford a Pelican case, get a Ziploc bag. Double it up.
No, it's fun. We're gonna last time I had them, my previous student got a bunch of Australian Swarovski crystals. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, and bejeweled her pager. So
it's about to get fancy.
That was actually a prerequisite when I started working with you. That I needed to have a bejeweled, bedazzled pager, which I never got. It was just a big disappointment for me.
I know. It's coming back though. Anyway, on topic.
I know that we wanted to talk about like money, like compensation and like vacation stuff. Like I don't know where you all want to go with that, but
it's a good question. Go for it. Where do you want to go with that?
Well, I just think it's really interesting. It's just a conversation that's been coming up so much, and I feel like ever since I've been a student midwife, it's been like a question that I get from other people, because I'll be like, I'm working, but I'm not really, like, I don't really have a job. I'm a student, but
I work nights and weekends.
But my time is, you can't quite hold down a regular job, and they're just like, how do you do it? And I think that's just the question for student midwives, like, how do you work on call, irregular hours, integrating clinic days, and support yourself? And I think that as a midwifery community, we're starting to have that conversation more and more, as we're realizing, like, oh, we need more different types of people to be able to become midwives. How do we make that more accessible? How do we help students create a sustainable life that doesn't, they might get licensed and
already be burnt out.
Yeah, and they're burnt out because they've been a student for 5 years and they weren't making any money, and they were, it's just so complicated. Yeah. So
and last time we gathered, we were talking about like midwives of color, student midwives of color, and how there was this whole process, like, this is what we need from you, and we want more students of color. And the woman that they were interviewing, she's like, it's not sustainable for me what you're asking of me,
like there needs to be some, like, we want to take money out of it, because I think there's a really noble way that the apprenticeship model is like based on this mutual exchange of learning and service, and that is really incredible, and it doesn't really exist in that many other aspects of the work of like regular jobs. So in some ways I think there's a really lovely romantic concept of apprenticeship model, and when you like place that in the middle of capitalism, and then you're like, okay, fend for yourself, it doesn't work so well. It's like, so I think that there are certain midwives who are starting to pay students, others who are finding ways to give them jobs that they feel comfortable compensating them for in a way that allows them to,
like extra help outside of the student role.
Right, like,
and then that can be its own thing. Like, what is a student role, and what is like a task you're asking them to do that isn't really their job,
Well, and I came from the birth center model, and I don't think this necessarily applies to all birth centers, but where I was working there was a lot of admin stuff that was just considered part of the student role. And in some ways I'm really grateful, because like I was saying, I got to learn all that, like stocking and ordering and sterilizing and doing all the email admin stuff. And also there came a point where, you're going to many births a week and you're doing all that on top of it, and it starts to feel a little icky, like it just doesn't feel good anymore. And so figuring out like, what is, because midwifery, like learning to be a midwife isn't just doing prenatals and catching babies and going to postpartums. Like it does involve all that other stuff.
And you don't want to end up licensed and then realize like, oh shit,
right,
there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I have no idea about.
Yeah, it's all the business aspect of it that is really not integrated into a lot of the education. And just assume that you'll kind of get access to that through your apprenticeship.
And I think when you've been practicing, long enough that you have an established practice and enough of a client load as a midwife, there are things that it's really great to delegate to other people. And whether that is a student or someone hiring like CPA or things like that. I think and Sophia, you and I are sort of at that place where we're trying to like things like social media, like just stuff that like is exactly. Yeah. So that we don't burn out, and that we can grow our practice, and we can take on students, and, be involved politically in the midwifery community, and the things that like, I don't know, as a mom of 2 kids, it's a lot to do, to manage. So if there are things that you can pass on to a student that ideally is helpful for them to learn, and then, you'd be compensating someone else doing it for some of the stuff, but moving away from the model of like, when I was a student, it was definitely like, this is how you earn your keep and, I was really happy to do it because I was so excited to be at births for a long time. And then it was like, okay, I'm carrying this birth tub up the stairs for you at every single birth, and that's fine. And I don't expect like, even to be compensated, but I don't want to be treated like shit
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I know
and
I
do all the
really-
schlep work, you know, and it just felt like there comes a point, it was like this hazing ritual where it was like, you know, you need to do XYZ. And maybe it was cute in the beginning, but like when you're finishing up and you're really working hard and you're an adult with maybe children or your own life going on or whatever, it just started to feel, like icky, like you were saying.
well, you know how
Yeah.
like nurses, it's that whole like eat the young kind of behavior.
Yeah.
I was just having a conversation with Emma after the last birth we were at, because I was saying I was a student recent enough that I remember that exact feeling that you're talking about, Leah. And I told her, I want you to know what's going through my head when I'm at births. My thought is like, okay, the birth tub needs to be emptied and deflated. The mom needs a vaginal exam to like check for lacerations. Like these things need to be done. I'm like, I don't want to ask her to do the birth tub because I don't want her to think I'm giving her the grunt work. Like I have all these like conundrums, but I also want her to have the experience of the vaginal exam, like, oh. And so I was telling her, it would be great for me if you could just like not wait for instructions, because I also feel like a nag. Like this is my own thing that I'm working on too, you know, even with my relationship with my husband, like it would be nice if you just like jumped in and handled something versus me having to ask, because then it just feels like, you know, I'm like asking
more work for you then.
Yeah. So I was like, it's nice if you just like be more of a self-starter and like just handle like, okay, or even check in like, okay, what needs to be done? Okay, I'll take this, you know, and just like handle it. So I don't have to also, I don't want to feel like I'm like managing the situation, that it's more of like teamwork and we're all working together to get it all done.
And it's also like, but you're bringing a level of awareness to it where you're like, I have an awareness of this power dynamic, or maybe like where this could get exploitative and I really don't want to go there. And that is manifesting itself in that way. And I worked with some preceptors who didn't feel that way. And I've also worked with other people who were like, you know, I'm never going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself as a midwife. Like we will clean everything together. We'll do the whole thing together. We'll leave at the same time. And I feel like people fall into different camps. And I don't know if it's necessarily generational, but I really appreciated that when I heard that from a midwife after I'd been kind of doing the other model where we had been, you know, first to come and like last to leave. It just felt like a level of respect that felt really good. And when you're talking about that hazing thing of the medical model having this really, I mean, we were talking about this last week, like it's a super patriarchal medical hazing process that's all about like there's no joy or pleasure until you suffer. And I just am shocked that that's how midwifery training
and like, well, I went through it. So, you know, like I remember Leah and I, when we started working together, we were having this conversation about never ever will we treat our students the way we were treated. And not that I was treated poorly. I remember like when I signed up for school, I think the school at the time was paying preceptors. But I remember my midwife like waived it and I got like money, like I didn't have to pay that money to the school that they would then pay her. So there were so many great ways that she like supported me through school. And I remember like, I would just pick like, okay, this is something that was amazing. And I really want to gift that to my students. And like, this was not so good. And I want to make sure that, you know, I don't pass that on.
Sophia, quickly, and we can do a pause if you want. The volume between the two of you there's a big difference. So I don't know if you can sit like more, either like both close or both a little further back, but it's like, Sophia, you're much louder than Clover. So it's like
I don't think it has anything to do with our position. I think
it's to do with your robust.
All right. Well, I'm just pointing it out with love.
I can get a little closer and see if that helps. Is that louder?
Yeah, that's better.
I have a feeling that everyone on the podcast knows when I'm talking because they're like, oh, we got to turn the volume down.
Maybe. You said it, not me. Yeah, no, totally. It's, and I think like what we were saying is if you're a preceptor and you're in a position where you feel like you need to show your student how hard it can be, or, you know, whatever, that it's not the right fit.
Oh, and another thing too that Emma was saying recently that she appreciated that I learned, you know, from experiencing the opposite is while she was doing like a newborn screen, I was there like assisting her. And if there were like things that weren't right, I was correcting in a really subtle way that wasn't so subtle when I was a student. I really felt like the spotlight was on the mistake I was making, you know, in the moment, and it did not feel good at all. And so she has expressed multiple times how like very subtle my support is when she's like learning something new or like maybe doing something wrong, you know, with a blood draw, maybe there's like a step that's missing. It's all just like hand her the piece instead of like pointing out to her what she's doing wrong. I just kind of like support her, and then we process ahead of time. I remember that was a thing. I really wanted to make sure that there was no like shaming in front of clients, you know. So that has felt good to support students in that way too.
Yeah. So through a few conversations, Nina and I have had that I think have been really good too. Communication is so important. Is just a base way to try to get clear about compensation as a student. And Nina and I have worked together for a long time until she had a baby and took a break. I always say it that way because I love her daughter so much. She's the best baby. But like we have a really good rhythm where like she does just set up things and she does just take initiative and take down the tub. And it's like, we don't have to have a lot of those like conversations about like, I need you to do this. But we did talk recently about money and just trying to get clear about it, you know, because I think like when I was a student, I wasn't compensated for assisting midwives, even when I was, you know, I guess I'll say like the primary assist. That's like the language I'll use for that, like in lieu of another midwife being there, which is a whole other topic. Maybe we don't have time for today, but there was like this ambiguity of like, okay, am I gonna get paid? How much am I gonna get paid? Am I only gonna get paid if there isn't another midwife there? But you know, like what? Just having clarity. And I mean, I'll just share what we came up with at this point is like coming up with a set of things that are done at births, like breaking down the tub. And, you know, I'm in a position right now where I'm delegating a little more of the physical responsibilities at births,
which I'm happy to do.
We'll have a surprise reveal about that next week. But you know, like, yeah, totally. But asking things that aren't like the most fun, like, please break down the birth tub and clean it and pack it so that it's like, right, all it needs is a new liner and it's ready to go, and like sterilizing instruments and restocking the birth bag and stuff like that. Things that to me are like hopefully beneficial for learning, but aren't, especially at like the, you know, as a primary under supervision student, things that she like needs to learn, you know, things that I normally would be jumping in and doing as a team. Like you said, Sophia, like we're all doing this together. So I'm compensating her $200 per birth for those things, just regardless.
Yeah.
And if we're with a client who feels comfortable and I have her assist me as the like a prime, and this is something like for future students, this stuff will start when you are primary under supervision as far as assisting. Like new students that come in, Nina's job will be to train them how to do the birth tub and sterilize and, you know, tie up loose ends with the chart, make sure everything's like saved and in there, have the paperwork for the birth certificate printed and ready, things like that. So brand new green students will be compensated to do that. But once you're being signed off as primary under supervision and you're there assisting in lieu of a midwife because you are a trained birth attendant, I'm paying her an additional $500.
Nice.
And so it feels good to just have it be really clear.
Yeah.
So like if she's the only one there assisting, then she's getting paid $700.
Yeah.
And if it's a client that she found and is essentially hiring her and she brought into the practice, then it's different. It's a lot more.
And that feels really, especially towards the end, when I really am just trying to focus because I took that time off. Like I'm just trying to get it done at this point. For years, I was doing in-home care at the same time, you know, which was kind of flexible in that there wasn't like, it wasn't a restaurant job. It wasn't, I could come and go. If I had a birth, it was okay. I could go the next day and do my in-home care work. And it was the only kind of job that I could find that I could do in conjunction with midwifery school without it being a huge stressor. But with COVID and stuff, that all kind of changed, and the woman I was helping moved away. And then it was just kind of like, now I just really want to focus on this. And so it gives me that opportunity to just really put my heart and my energy and labor into what we're doing right now together and finishing. And that feels really good for like the phase I'm in. So I'm really appreciative of that. And I think it's a really important conversation to have. And I think it can be really uncomfortable for a lot of students, because you just kind of come into a practice working with someone who already has their routines down. If they've worked with a student before, they know how they want to do it. And there's been a lot of just kind of default practices that student preceptors have. And I like to see that it's kind of, the conversation is starting to shift, and people are talking about like, what does accessibility look like? What does sustainability look like? What is like, how can we have it be equitable for both people, or, everyone involved? And because midwifery school like has been so inaccessible, especially to like BIPOC midwifery students, that is like so important to have that conversation, and for primary students to feel like, yeah, I've been doing this long enough that there is like some value that I'm bringing to this space, and to feel that reciprocity too, I think is really.
And urging preceptors too to like pause and reflect back when you were a student, what would have felt good. And maybe it's not like necessary in quotes, but like if your preceptor had done this for you, how would that have felt? And like, don't you want your students to feel that way? I know we were talking, Leah, about delegating, in terms of the business side of things. That last year was a big year for me for delegating. And this year I hired a financial advisor, and she broke down everything I did last year, and we set goals for this year. And she gave me like 3 different budgets to work off of, like basically what I did last year, because I feel confident I could do that again, what my goal is, and then somewhere in the middle. And we broke that down. And because of it, I was able to hire Emma as an employee. So we had talked about options like, do you want me to pay you like per birth, like you guys are doing? And what we decided would be better for her is to have like a stable weekly income that she could rely on. And so that's what we ended up doing. Is my advisor was able to say, this is how much you can theoretically afford for the year. And then we divided it up by the weeks. And so that's what I'm paying her bi-weekly. And because I'm doing that for her, she is doing more like admin type work, and so she's like, right now, she's probably, doing some work too. So she takes care of like things that I wouldn't typically ask of Clover, like forms that I want for the business and, stuff like that.
Right. And there could be students who aren't available to do that much. Yeah. And maybe they're in a position financially or with a support system where like they don't need that extra money. So like if you have more than one student, or it's just not, I think having an option of like, these are some of the things that I have paid students do. Are you available? I mean, things like at the birth, that's different, because that's like the birth, that's a different thing. But like, outside of births admin stuff, like it may be that someone cares for a family member and has lots of children and, isn't able to take that on. And like, that's okay. You don't have to feel guilty about that. And like, you can't be a student and you can't do this because those things aren't doable for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like
good conversation.
Other piece of it that was helpful for me when I was a student, like finishing up at the birth center and finishing my assist phase and moving into primaries, I remember a midwife kind of mentor friend of mine was like, well, are you asking these preceptors that you're interviewing if they offer any type of financial compensation? And I was like, no, because I didn't even know that could be part of the conversation. And she was like, yeah, I mean, there are some midwives who will pay you. And that just felt like, mind blown. And then I was just asking all of these other student friends of mine, like, are you asking this at interviews? Because if all the students started asking, well, I'm interviewing at all these different practices and this is what this practice has offered to compensate, like I think that level of, I don't want to say pressure because that feels like too intense,
but like shift it.
Yeah, like
in
bringing
one
it into the
direction.
conversation that
Right.
other people are starting to offer it. I feel like it changes the conversation a little bit, because I had definitely done interviews where when I brought that up, it was like, no,
What are you talking
what are
about?
you talking about?
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
how this works.
Well, and like you said about sort of, you know, you call it the patriarchal model or whatever it is, but it's also something that Sophia and I share, which I think is part of why we get along, is that we really strongly believe like the more midwives, the merrier. And the idea being that as a midwife who's delegating these things to a student, you have more energy to put out into the community to get more clients, to spread more information about midwifery. And students who aren't completely fried, maybe they can do a little more self-care, maybe they, whatever, feel more confident in their skills, like feel more respected in the practice, like their energy they're putting out also is like more positive, bringing in more clients. So it's like, the money that you're paying students as a midwife, if you're coming from a place of scarcity and feeling threatened by new midwives, then yeah, of course you're not. And I'm not saying that's the only reason people aren't paying students, but like that's a piece of it. So if you can move through that and look at it like, okay, the more like women, in the community, people in the community becoming midwives who are like, feel confident and respected and can do self-care and all of that, the more home births are going to happen, and the more families.
We're only 1% home births. Can you imagine even if we went up to like 10% home births?
Right.
There would be
2%.
There would be no way
the midwives,
we could take on that many clients. We need more midwives, and the more home births happen, the more likely insurance is to cover it, the more likely we are to be able to get paid more and to take more on or less on, less clients paid more, so it's only going to benefit all of us.
Yeah. And just having that view is it's like a paradigm shift, I think, generationally for midwives. And it was just different. I mean, like some of the people that I worked with early on have been practicing for decades, and like it was just really different when they became midwives. And so it's right. Well, and it's just that there was 2 midwifery schools and people brought babies to birth strapped on their back, and it's just like it was just everything was different, and it's going to be different in 30 years, but it's just reevaluating kind of how you want to practice and teach students and all that stuff.
And it's something that's really like missing. And maybe I go to NMI, National Midwifery Institute, and there's been I started in 2014 and I'm trying to finish now. And I mean, I officially, I think, enrolled in 2015, but the whole curriculum has changed. I mean, everything about the school structure has changed. The setup for support systems for the student, the way that we, enter our experience, documentation, everything is completely different than when I started and when Leah was there, especially like when it was just mailing things off in like a vanilla envelope to some other place in the world. And so I appreciate all of those changes. It's made it much more streamlined. And I think that a big part of what's missing still in the school is kind of, or what they're like moving towards, is just working on supporting students to be able to feel like, oh, this is an option to ask preceptors, or to feel empowered to be like, I feel like we need to have a conversation about XYZ, or just, kind of like shift the dynamics a little bit and make it more human and more horizontal in terms of like community building and how important that is. And it's, I think, something that I hope to see more of that conversation happening in school, and like even maybe a whole course about like the preceptor student relationship and navigating conversations around this stuff. And so it's, it's definitely like changing a lot. And in a good direction.
Well, this was a good topic. I'm glad we were able to check in about it all. And now our time has come to an end.
There will be more student preceptor rants.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
a good meaty subject.
It is. Yeah.
Well,
I
thank
would
you.
love to do a panel of students anyway. Yeah.
Wow. Is
All right,
it not
ladies.
a panel? No.
More students.
Half panel.
Half panel.
Well, thank you everybody for listening, and tune in next week for more.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us at Born Wild Podcast on Instagram. For inquiries or feedback, you can email us at bornwildpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me, Emma Ray, on Instagram at Emma Ray, REA. Sophia at sophiabirth.com.
And me, Leah, at Bay Area Home Birth.
We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people. And as always, stay wild.